do we have to get passive house certification? That's something that has to be evaluated. So I think sustainability has to be here. Maybe sustainability principles, passive house principles should be here, but we didn't specifically say passive house certification.
Right.
And I think that that's the thing that people should think about as they're evaluating this and looking at it. What can we work towards? Because we'll be talking about it in a minute, but we have square footages and we have student enrollment, we have budgets, and that's something that we're always going to keep reminding everybody of, is that we want to get everything in here, but everything within a certain.
If you're like me, you're sitting there saying, how do I make this decision, right? And the goal is to get information, to get more information. You'll see the beginnings of that today. We're going to talk about square foot implications and general cost implications of some of these things. Some of them we don't quite know yet. Okay, we'll be honest with that.
One thing I'm wondering is, this is a living document, and right now where we're at, we don't have a lot of information about budget and what the must-haves are going to cost versus what the want-to-haves cost. And in some ways, if this is a living document, I'm thinking we can almost say, we almost want to narrow it down to what are those things that we're going to be wanting or considering rather than we're going to do. So I wouldn't want to take any of these things out, because yes, a building without a full-size, town-sized auditorium could be a very successful educational facility. But we don't want to take it out of the charter, but we want to make it clear that it's something that we're considering without all the information we have. And that this document will keep changing as we get more information.
And I offer for consideration that you approve the charter at the conclusion of the feasibility study, only because your feasibility study is your opportunity to explore all of this. We'll be working with you on the square footages, we'll be working with you on enrollment, sustainability. We've been asked to kind of isolate and identify what the costs are for some of these decisions. So over the course of the next couple of months, we'll be providing you with that information so that you can then have a more informed approach and prioritize and have a complete understanding.
Makes sense.
So I think at the beginning, when we started working on this, I think I remarked that this version of this iteration of it is really more like a guidepost for the design team and for this committee, as Kristen noted, through feasibility. The audience then for the charter, once we got through feasibility, is the broader community. And but I think I always use these two versions. One, to inform ourselves of what are our shared goals as a committee that is representative of the broader community, and how does that inform the design and feasibility process. And then once we kind of go through all that, all right, well now we know generally what we can afford, what we can do, let's refine this, and then that's the charter that the audience then is, okay, voters of Concord, here's what we think the right project to deliver is. So I agree with Kristen, but I don't think we should walk away from these because we spent a lot of time talking about each and every one of these things. So let's stick to it for now, and then see what we get out of feasibility.
I tend to think that's probably a good direction. That I don't know what we call it. We could approve, it's sort of our original aspirational goals or something, that, and then will be refined over the course of the project in consultation with the town and the committee. I don't, something like that moves us forward in the sense we have all of the areas of direction with a little bit of detail, but as we go through a very involved data information collection process, we refine and basically vote on in final form down the road.
Would it be helpful then to call this a draft design goals instead of project charter or something?
Something like that. We'll work on the name, okay, but I think I got the concept, Any other observations or? I appreciate whoever brought it down to one sentence. I sat there looking at it. These
are all taken from all of you.
It's a skill to do without making it these all-inclusive sentences. You have to say something without it being too long. Any other comments or observations? So we'll probably revisit this again with some of the general comments that we heard and come up with an explanation of what we just discussed and using this as a guide while we collect information, and then we'll consider it at the next meeting, but then later on refine it when we've made a series of decisions. Does that make sense to people?
So send me your comments.
Yeah, that's was my question.
Send me your
So,
comments,
Julie again,
anything
okay.
that you wanna change, you don't like the language in, even just small words, you wanna, redistribute the words in a different manner, that's completely fine with me. And then at our next meeting, between now and then, I'll send it off to everyone to review
Great.
again, and,
By way of process, do you sort of look at all of that and sift it and sort it with our chairs so that you can synthesize it? Because you're gonna be getting very independent things from 20 people conceivably.
right, so I didn't, during this process, I actually went through all of your statements and kind of looked at it. Some of them were repetitive, some of them the language is a little better, some of them I just incorporated some language from this to this because it made it
Okay.
sound
Well, you did a
more
good job.
appealing and broader. I think the goal at this point is, in my opinion, is to have a broader idea and less, narrowly focused on one individual item, because you don't wanna go back and say, well, we missed that. You wanna make it as broad, as a statement as possible with an idea behind it, I guess is my point. So, I can do that with
Well,
With
then
John
I
and
would
Tim.
only say if you're in doubt about how to
Yeah.
put something in or out, that first layer of
Yeah, I talked with Andy and
inquiry
Mike
would
about
help
it.
us. Yeah.
Oh, I don't doubt that will happen.
Yeah, I think going forward, we're gonna see which of these are charters that tell us how to operate, which are essentials, non-negotiables about producing a school for kids, and which are aspirational goals that we're gonna try to do our best to reach with all the difficult trade-offs that lie in our future.
Well, and I think that I put them in a specific order, so the last two really fell on this committee, and the goals of this committee and what needs to come from you all
Right.
to your community, so.
Okay, I think we know where we're going on that. Thank you, Julie.
You're
That was well done. Next item, I believe, is the schedule. Is that right, Mike? Is it Andy, you're gonna?
Yes.
Andy,
So where we are right now, we narrowed down from 3 to 2 options on the schedule. We got the designer's contract signed this week, so we're all set with that. We're looking at to finish the option 1, finish the schematic design in July of 2020, and then town meeting in the summer, and then start the design document, DD and then CD. So we're looking at doing that in the fall, October of 2020, and the design that duration would take around 13.5 months, and then we start construction in December of 2021 and finish that in June 2023, so we can start moving in, and then fall opening, school opening. So the second option, so the first option has the town meeting in the summer, and the second option is based on the town meeting having it in the fall, because we got some feedback from a couple meetings ago that a summer town meeting is probably not going to work, so we pushed this out.
Just a quick, let me step back for a second. Prior to this meeting, we had 3 schedule options. We had the standard process, we had the really fast track, and then the somewhat fast track. We've had some discussions with the senior leadership as well as with the design team. And we think the risk versus reward, if you will, on going, especially on the very fast track, it's just, there's a lot of risk there, there's a lot of potential premium costs. And we're recommending to eliminate that scheduled option from the option. And even the fast track, we're a bit concerned with that, and that it might have to go CM at risk. You don't have that option of DPP versus CM at risk. And again, there's a lot of risks associated with that. So I think both of these schedule options are both currently on the standard scheduled process. One of the discussions we had is that standard schedule process is specific to Concord. We're not going forward with the MSBA. If you were to be going forward with the MSBA, even if we had started at the same point, this would be the aggressive schedule if the MSBA was involved. If we were to have heard from the MSBA last week that we were gonna be considered for that.
Yeah, just so you all know, we did hear that we are not being considered, so we've been declined again.
So, but if we were, then you would have had to go back to, today would have been August 1st, and then everything would have been pushed out from there, and this would have been on the aggressive. So both of these options are using the standard schedule process, but we still think this is a reasonably aggressive schedule process.
Yeah, when we talked about this, there were three sort of large areas that I was very concerned with. First is impact on overall cost of schedule, okay, and versus the accelerated schedule versus not. Second was the quality of the product, okay. Can the professionals who are partnering with us do this in the timeframes that we're putting out in this schedule and do it in an effective manner? And thirdly is the process of getting this socialized with the town and in a position that they're going to actively support it in a process that's reasonable, okay? And one of the things we were talking about is trying to move things up very quickly. And I think it became clear as we met that when we examined those three things, it was wise, okay, to use the 2023 start date for school, okay, along really all three of those dimensions, okay, that the cost, I'll be very candid here, when I look back on the high school experience, one of the things I think that we could have done better, okay, is that when we got to the point where it was costed by the architect and then the builder did their costing, we had a $10 million difference between where we were at the end of what was essentially the project we're doing right now, and the builder taking a look at it, what I can actually build this for, okay? And that was, if you recall, those of you who were following it, it was a major problem. I'm very sensitive to that when we're done, okay, with the process that we outline on this piece of paper, that we're extremely confident of those costs, that if we say it's X dollars, that's our best shot and hopefully accurate in terms of what the builders are going to come back and say. This is, you never know, but it's for absolute certain, but it's going to be right at that amount, give or take a little bit. Okay, that's really important in terms of the credibility with the community and the process. Okay, so the cost, that, and then with both Mike and Kristen and Lorraine, when asking directly, are you comfortable? I think there was significantly less comfort with a very compacted schedule in terms of doing that versus getting the work done versus a schedule that we've laid out. Both of these, we'll make some decisions based on other things, but they are comfortable with the ability to get the work done accurately in that. And I do think that over the next calendar year, we really have to we really need that time to. This is going to be a very big expenditure for the town, and I think it's very important that we take not all the time in the world, but the time to get that done correctly. And the impact on I think when we looked at it, whatever small impact that we may have gotten by 6 months ahead in terms of was overweighed by the factors we just talked about. So that was the way we came to this suggestion. Any others want to comment?
I think the only other thing to kind of dovetail with that is one of the things we've talked about is, if you ask me what does an OPM do in the simplest term, is we manage risk. Risk can be cost, it can be not meeting your program, it can be not meeting your schedule, it's managing risk. And we think right now with the three options on the table, the standard option is really the best option. We're gonna be talking about the risk register in a few minutes, and Andy will talk about that, but that's minimizing your risk and maximizing your benefit is the two things we need to do. And I think that the standard schedule option does do that. Andy, I think if you can we have two options on the table here, if we can maybe talk specifically about what's the difference between these two options. And I know that's gonna relate to one of the items on the risk register that we have to, everything on the risk register, and I'm jumping ahead here, is a decision that this committee needs to make, basically. And so that's kind of what we're talking about with the two options here, is that we've got two options on the table, and we don't need to maybe answer this today, but there's a decision that has to be made about, is it option A or B?
Yeah, my goal is for people to just understand this today. I don't think we have to
Right. Yeah, we're not
answer.
looking for-
Between these two, where we are though, is it's sort of one of these two, okay?
That's what we're,
And
that's
that's
what we're recommending.
So as I mentioned earlier, option one is specifically designed for town meeting in the summer, starting from the end of August. So we have a 45 days from schematic design, and then we have a town vote for another 45 days. So by the time we start DD, it's going to be October, the end of October 2020. And option two, we'll have a fall town meeting. So as I identify in the risk register, is we need to make a decision, if we can get a decision by the end of this year, when do we want to have the town vote? Is it fall or the summer? That will help us with our planning, especially for the design team. So if with the summer, option one, we can finish construction and get everybody in the building in mid-July 2023. And then option two, with the fall town meeting, we could finish construction in July and get you into the building mid-August 2023 to be ready.
So talk about risk.
Yeah.
That's too much risk for me to think we're gonna get occupancy in the middle of August, because things happen. To lose a couple weeks, we're in big trouble. So that would be my comment, that we all consider pushing too far into that summer is gonna be a challenge.
So just so you know, I mean, we're saying construction complete, for example, on option two, on July 2nd, and that's giving you 6 weeks to get in. In reality, construction finishing on July 2nd means you probably can start moving into some parts of it, a month before that. So I think what we're saying here is either option here gets you in reasonably comfortable, and we can work on adjusting duration slightly. The big question here is twofold. When is the town meeting gonna happen, and when is the town vote gonna happen? And I know there's been questions on that. How does that relate to the general election that's gonna be happening? And, do we need to coincide with the general election, or do we need to purposely not coincide with the general election? Those are the type of things that need to be discussed over the next 30 days or so. And I think that's the time frame that we're looking to.
Said another way, there's a lot of sentiment that the earlier we can get the construction done, with the goal of moving in the fall of 2023, the better we are for the school system and the operations of it, okay? And what we're trying to understand and talk through is the implications of that in terms of when we would, one of the big anchor points there is the election. So we don't have to answer that today. I just want people to understand that's where we are. Big points. I think in either one of these, we're focused on starting, having the school open for fall of 2023. And the question that we want to think about is the process this coming year that would allow us to move the move-in date a little earlier. Okay, that's what.
Can I ask Laura a question? It seems to me one of the things we've heard a lot about is acclimating teachers to a new building. And if we're really sort of serious about this 21st century learning model, that there's some real differences in how teachers will be experiencing the space. So I just wonder if that's also part of your thinking, is having the summer for teachers to really acclimate and become well-trained in using the building. That's a big part of the success of this project.
Yeah, I think now that we're to a place where we've decided the best course is to aim for the fall, and the gift of the summer is there, certainly we'd want to maximize that, and having access to the building as early as possible is very different than just doing a quick move in August. So you're right.
To that point, I'll say a lot of projects we work on, school projects, have a goal of getting substantially complete, I'll say in August. And we're trying to be substantially complete, I'll say substantially before August, whether it's June or July or even May or something like that. And I think it has a whole bunch of benefits. What you just mentioned is one of the key benefits is it gives the town and the district the opportunity to get into the building, set it up the way you need it. Other opportunities here is from a bidding schedule, things like all the finishes, the tile work, the lockers. If everybody else's project is finishing in August, all those workers are working on that project in July.
Yeah.
If we can move those workers to working in May on our project, we're gonna get a cost benefit from that. Another thing is, we get out there, we start digging, if you have an unforeseen, if there's a labor shortage, if there's any sort of material issues, we can absorb a certain amount of schedule delay without impacting the students. So having that ability to have that flexibility, and again, it helps with the cost, because the alternative is now I have to pay premium to work, say, a second shift or overtime to keep my schedule, because otherwise I'm delaying my students. You have the option now to look and say, look, I want to pay that premium and hold my May 1st date, or I'm okay letting May 1st slip to June 1st, that type of thing. So I think there's a lot of benefits to that, and I think either of these options right now give you that option, that flexibility, and again, that's taking your risk profile and dropping it down a little bit.
So we've talked a bit here, I just want to make sure that all the members of the committee have the opportunity to, one, do you understand what we're talking about here in terms of the schedule, the dilemmas into it, and any comments on the issues that were raised relating to the decision? Yeah.
Maureen, when does school get in session? Is it in late August 2004?
Yes, I would expect late August,
So school would be in session August 26th?
somewhere in there,
Okay.
typically, yeah.
Okay.
So you mentioned the decision around the vote, like whether it coincides with the general election or not. Can you share, what are the factors there in deciding whether it makes sense for them to coincide with the general election?
Anybody want to start with that? I mean, I'm
I was gonna say,
Steve,
I think I've been advocating for that. In addition to the effort and expense of having a special election for one item, when people talk about community input, the ultimate community input is going to be on election day, and the best turnout that voters are gonna have, or that the town's gonna have voters, is on the national election for 2020.
Mhm.
And so, I think that the schedule for opening in the schools is exceptionally important. You don't want to lose that and have that be a problem. But at the same time, focusing on that presupposes approval. And what is, and I guess this is a rhetorical question, when is the best time to ask the voters for the resources to do the project? Is it, and I'll say, is it resources to be on the ballot for the general election? You have to notify the Secretary of State in this case, some months before, so I just want to put that out there. If you probably be putting it on the ballot before the town meeting vote under the standard schedule, but it's just, when's the best time to ask, I think is really the kind of question there.
And I'll not weigh in, but share some of what I've heard. We hear a lot of public feedback in our role. And I've heard it on both sides. I've actually literally had people come to me and say both, well, you better make sure that the vote is with the general election, because you wouldn't want people to accuse you of trying to, have your own on a separate day and slide it by. On a different day, I had someone come to me and say, well, you guys better make sure you have it on a separate day, because if you have it on the same day as the regular election, everybody's gonna think you're trying to hide it under the presidential election and slip it by everyone. So, not to be the pessimist here, but the optics could be difficult either way. And obviously our goal is not to slide by, our goal is to have the most focus on this possible, so that everybody can truly understand the question and what's going on. And I think it does become a debate of, is the public more able to participate in this process and understand the question if they're going at the same time as the election, the presidential election, or if it's separate so that the two aren't kind of, blurring each other. That's the question that we need to debate.
Yeah, I would think though, given the time frame and kind of community outreach and communication capabilities you're trying to set up, people are going to be very well informed before they get to the ballot, whether it's separate or part of it. I'd be astonished that we're not capable of informing people so well that when someone comes in, should it be a November vote, they say, what is this all about? I've never heard. This is at the bottom of the ballot. I mean, come on, let's be realistic. I think so far what I'm seeing is we have great capability.
We
getting the
do.
word out. And if somebody is clueless come November ballot, then there's probably no way of reaching that individual.
That may be right.
Well,
Sorry.
and we, yeah, to your point, so leading up to the votes last spring, when we had the town meeting and then ballot vote to fund this phase, I mean, we put incredible time into public information sessions, I mean, crazy time. And there were still people at the end saying, well, what are you talking about? So I think to some extent, no matter what we do, yes, there are still gonna be people who haven't
Again, we do not have to decide this today, okay? We raise it, this is kind of where we are. The big highlights from this part of this discussion, move in fall 2023. Try to get as much time as we can for the professionals to do a good job in moving in a reasonable way. And the final result of that is we're gonna have to figure out some key dates here in the next couple of months. So let's put your thoughts into that, into what you think about what we just discussed and what the best way for it to play out is.
Sorry, Tim, I just have a quick question. On the town vote, does it just require a simple majority of those who voted?
At the ballot, it's a simple majority, at town meeting is 2/3.
Two-thirds.
Yeah. I'm not sure I heard it. We'll get from you, Stephen, the cutoff date for communication with the Commonwealth about
Yeah,
word to be on the ballot.
at a prior meeting, I think I did have that exchange with Kari, the town clerk, and I want to say it's sometime in August or something like that.
Oh, okay.
For ballot.
All right, so it doesn't affect what Tim's saying about our timeline here for a decision at all. Okay.
Any other questions about that? That's what, good. Okay, the next item on the agenda is sort of the design changes inform, well, not changes, we don't have a design yet, the implications of certain things on cost implications, right? The design changes since Feingold's feasibility study. If you recall, that feasibility study, which was done a long time ago, 2017, it formed some of the basis for the presentation that we saw, and the numbers that we saw had a square footage of 125,000. We sort of trying to take a little preliminary look at that, what the implications of some of the things that we're talking about are. Expanded gymnasium, and what was the other one?
So, Andy, do you want to run through that?
Yeah, you want to let's just go through the analysis. But
So Feingold Alexander uses the MSBA standard guideline. At the time, the gym, the standard guideline for middle school is around 6,000 square feet. So now we have the designer on board, and we're using that guideline, but right now we're trying to design the gym so that the community also use it. So right now we don't have the actual square footage yet, but it's probably going to be more than that. So I just want to bring it to everybody's attention. The auditorium, MSBA standard.
we're looking at this item right here.
MSBA
Okay, it's a lot of
standard.
detail here, but there's a couple of simple things we need to highlight. Yeah.
So MSBA standard doesn't usually participate on the auditorium, and as we talked earlier, an auditorium for town meeting. So I just want to bring it out there. That's something new. And also sustainability, passive house, we talked about that. That's something that's not in the Feingold Alexander study. There's been some escalation between 2017 and now, between 5 to 7% each year. Just bring that up to the table. I'm going to pass it over to Kristen to talk more on into detail on the program.
Just real quick before you get to the program, so what Andy was saying there is we have an original budget that we talked about of $80 to $100 million. That was based off of the Feingold Alexander study that was done about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago? 2017. And the things that Andy just highlighted are items that have been adjusted or the thought process has changed maybe since that study has been published. So, for example, an auditorium was not necessarily considered under the Feingold-Alexander because the MSBA standard for a middle school is you have a cafeteria, not an auditorium. So we're now considering an auditorium, and then when Kristen goes through the space summary, she can talk specifically about that. But the oversized gymnasium, the sustainability discussion with net zero and passive house and everything came up after that study. And then the enrollment of that study was 720, we're now talking potentially 760. And again, that's something that we're gonna be evaluating. And then, so just all these things factor into the building size. And that's what we're gonna be talking about right now.
And so I figure it might start with a little orientation on the sheet. I think it's a pretty overwhelming sheet, so just so that everyone can understand what they're looking at. So,
You could read it,
so on the right-hand side is where the MSBA standard spaces are collected in the right-hand column. So the only items that you enter to define the MSBA standard is at the lower area of the two cells highlighted in yellow. It says 253 and 507 in those cells. Those are the enrollments for those grade levels in this school. And so once you populate the student number, it autofills upward. So based on those numbers, and there are calculations that say, actually, assuming this number of students, X number per square feet, that's how it populates it. It also populates it based on their standards, such as the auditorium or cafetorium standards, where it says if you don't trip above, say, 800 students, then you get this size of cafeteria. If you go above that, then you get the next size and things like that. So those are all formula-based. The breakdown of the students is also developed as a formula. It is number of grades of 5 through 6 divided by the total number of students divided by the number of students per grade. So to get to that number, and similarly for the upper middle. So in the end, your total is the 760 that's reflected above those two yellow cells. So that's kind of an overview on the autofill. There are still some glitches in the MSBA spreadsheet. You'll see at the bottom, the very bottom, it says 1.44. That is the multiplier to go from net square feet to gross square feet. Net square feet is your usable space, gross square feet accounts for all your walls and mechanical rooms and all of that other corridors, all of the not-program space. The typical metric to use at this point would be 1.5. So that's why you see to the right of the MSBA number of 121, we took the net square feet and did the 1.5 just as a reference there. So, I guess backing up one step, the total building net floor area based on the MSBA is again looking at that student number breakdown about 4 lines up to 84,638. So that's the net square feet, that's multiplied by the 1.44 to get to your 121. So this column doesn't include the auditorium considerations or the gymnasium considerations. Then moving to the left of that, you see the top of those columns says proposed. In the MSBA process, you would be looking at an ad reno, you'd be looking at a new, and then you would have multiple space summaries, one of which would reflect an ad reno where it says existing to remain. You'd put in what of the existing building you're going to reuse for what spaces, and then in the new, that's your new building addition. In this case, we're only using the new column. It's our understanding from the Feingold report that that's the direction we're going. And of course, we are going to be validating the Feingold report as well. So in that new column, we've added in the gymnasium line, which is the first in yellow. We've increased that from the 6,000 on the right to 10,000. Based on our experience, this is a more common request for a gymnasium, but we'll be validating that in the program meetings. And then moving down to the other yellow area, the changes to the auditorium to account for a larger, to account for an auditorium, where you see 0 square footage and program on the right. Now, one of the things we'll be also working through in the programming meetings is how many seats for that auditorium. Given that it's not a typical middle school program, maybe it doesn't need to have 1 seat per student, maybe it needs to have more because of your town meeting sizing. So we'll be working with the team on that. So those are the right 2 columns, and then to the farthest to the left, frequently you populate the existing conditions just so that you for yourself understand how many classrooms you have, how much square footage is in classrooms, and so on. So that'll be on the left.
That's something we'll be doing down the line.
Yes.
So the numbers you've got here right now are prior to having any sort of programming, educational meetings at all, right? These are just
Correct.
kind of using the MSBA standards, so the MSBA says that you should have 24 students in a class. So the number of classes you've got is based off of that understanding, maybe not the Concord understanding. And the MSBA standard for special education or cafeteria size and everything, we haven't had those programming discussions yet. And so just, you have a big draft across this, but we want to make everybody aware that we don't want people to think this number is locked in and that it's absolutely 121,000 or absolutely 147,000. Again, this is to start the discussion, and we have to have all those programming meetings to actually fill into this and actually get a better understanding of where we actually need to go. But this early on in the preliminary, stages, it's a reasonable number to start the discussions with.
I just think it's really important we're clear on where the other numbers came from in the past, mostly for this committee, but for the community as well. We almost were, I sit here feeling like we had so much information going into the process, the process we're having right now, that we keep looping back to some of those pieces of information. And I just want to keep qualifying the real soft nature of all of the work that happened. Feingold did its best without any input on a design. And then the work we did last year prior to town meeting was truly based on actual projects that are out there. Again, without any input on design, just trying to get some numbers to work with, because it was very clear this community wasn't going to consider funding schematic design and feasibility without having some idea of the target we were aiming for. At that point, town meeting, it was a $90 million number because we needed a placeholder. Since then, we've made it 80 to 100. The truth is, this is the process that determines the cost of the building. I get a little nervous that we keep referencing all of those other numbers when, knowing how we got to those, they were meant to just be big picture ballpark so we could have the conversations. This is the conversation to decide how much the building's going to cost, which is driven by how big it is. So they're identifying all of the right things. The auditorium and gym are going to be the big swing discussions. There's probably no question about that. But I think to some extent, I would almost wish we just kept going forward and saying, okay, we heard the needs, we've got the research based on how we got here. What do we want this building to be while we monitor costs all throughout it? So I feel the need to qualify all of that because all of that other work was done at a really, really high level just so we could engage in the beginning initial conversations.
So the big highlight with an expanded gym and an auditorium, we're in the mid 145 approximately thousand square feet for the facility. That's sort of the net of this, right? And yeah.
And I think to Laurie's point, we maybe never mention the old study again. We're moving forward, and it's not even moving forward with this number. We're moving forward with the educational programming, and that's going to feed into the real numbers in the end.
I just have a quick question on the entries. So it says grades 5 and 6. That's assuming 0 for 5, and 253 students are in 6. It's right. I mean, are we talking about moving grades out of the elementary?
Absolutely not.
No.
That's
That's the MSBA form.
Alright.
Thank you for clarifying.
That's what I was like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe I missed that.
Yeah, no.
Check my contract.
So we will be keeping this up to date, and,
Yeah.
and so I'm glad that we're kind of familiar with the layout now, so we can.
Yeah, we'll get better, and this is sort of a start, again, another starting point where we'll get better and better information as we fill in the details of the design. All right. The next item is the risk register, is that right? Go ahead.
So I put together a risk register with some item in here that we hoping to get some decision on in the next couple months. One example is the number 7, the town meeting. We talked about that. So we're hoping to, because this will be impacting, like we need to know where we're going, we're heading for our schedule. So this is the high risk item. So some of the item like the auditorium we talked about, the reason it's on here is because of the size, so that may have a cost implication to that. Same thing with the gymnasium. And then another hot item is number 3, which we're trying to get a decision at the end of next month, which is the, are we going with the CM at risk or design bid build? So this has to do with, are we going with CM at risk, we're trying to get early packages. If we need it for passive house or net zero, that can be a beneficial to go with CM at risk, so we can procure some of the long lead item early on that. So
Start by explaining what the risk register is, so that, because I'm sure, we understand it, but, color coding and, what's higher in priority, explain the whole process.
So the purpose of the risk register, again, and like I said, anything in here that we identify and think you see in the green are the lower risk, but as we move forward, they'll probably become like an orange or like a red. Orange is a medium risk, and then red, so anything in red, we're hoping to get a decision as soon as possible. So that way we can either mitigate, avoid, or reduce the risk. The purpose is so that way it won't impact something else, like schedule-wise. Schedule can lead to cost, and also it has quality impact as well on some of these items. So
Andy, is likelihood, that's the likelihood it's a risk? Or what is the likelihood?
So the likelihood is that likelihood is kind of like a maybe, is it gonna happen, or sometimes what is it like so we got 4 different categories, likelihood, probable, possible, and let me see what else.
And unlikely, right?
And unlikely. So it's the likelihood and the impact. That's how if you put in if it's very likely, and if it's moderate, and if it's a medium in a proximity, then the rating will be in the medium. It will become a medium risk. But then if we waited a month for that risk will become a high risk. It will turn red. And this is something that I'm going to be using with the contractor, with this committee as we go forward. So it's something that we're trying to get some decision so that way we can mitigate it.
So this is a deal where you guys look at the entire schedule, is that right? And then you identify areas of risk.
We're trying to identify all the areas of risk that
Okay,
risk
so you enumerate those.
Exactly.
And then you do a set of rankings of sort of where we are with those and whether they're but what you're trying to do here is alert us to when we have to make some decisions, right?
That's ultimately what this is. It's to
Yeah.
identify the risk and let you know when you need to make a decision. And to your point, Matt, the likelihood is looking at the actual risk item. What is the likelihood of that risk item happening? The second item is the impact, is if it were to happen, what would be the impact to the project? And then the third, the proximity, is this gonna happen really soon? Is this gonna happen really late? And that really kind of goes to the decision-making process. So you take all of those. So something that is very low likelihood of happening, but if it happened, it would be a really bad thing to happen. But we have a long time, even though it's a really bad thing, might be a medium risk or a medium to low risk. But something that is very likely to happen, but maybe minimal impact, but we have to make a decision soon, might actually be a higher risk item because of, it's taking all 3 of those into account. So you assign a value from each of those, and that's how you get to the colors. And those colors are what to Andy's point, you want to focus on the red ones and then the yellow ones, and then the green ones, you know, the green ones are the ones that are the lower overall risk.
Can I ask a question about the construction delivery method and why that's, is it just for cost? That it's in order to get it into the cost estimate as a delivery method?
I think the delivery method, right now, what we're looking at is several items. One is overall project schedule, and if the design team is gonna be doing packages. But the other part of that feeds into it is my personal belief, and then maybe, you know, there's sort of a discussion, is if we were to try and get passive house certification, that might push you in one direction with the delivery method over another. Like, I don't know if DBB is an option if we were going to get passive house certification.
I guess that's why I'm asking, because some of these will inform that, and I think making that decision ahead of them will be difficult.
Right, and I think when we had first done this was prior to the meeting on the schedule, the fast, the aggressive schedule, the non-aggressive. So we might have to reconsider the likelihood, the proximity and things like that with some of these, but.
Okay, because that one, I think Lorraine had mentioned at one point, she could carry it as a line item in the SD cost estimate for, you know, whatever, you could do DBB base and then have a line item that takes you, and you said it was like 10% that you're seeing or something like that increase. Yeah, that may become yellow until we make some of these red decisions is my point, so.
But Mike, you can manipulate likelihood, impact, and proximity, and then it rolls all that up into risk rating.
That's exactly it.
Andy, the target to close the first three items, it says January-31-2019. Are those first three items
Sorry,
the goal for December? No, they're
2020, sorry.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so first three items are all pushed into 2020.
Yeah. So some of them, they can be resolved as we move forward, like those three items. The first two items, like the auditorium, the gym, as we go forward with the programming meeting, we can identify them. But I just want to identify them right now on this risk allowed, anything related to the project.
So if you just look at the red ones right now, right, you have construction delivery method, the town meeting, is that the data town meeting? Is that?
Yeah.
Is that what that is? Okay, the decision on passive house design, okay. What does living building challenge mean?
That's another standard like passive house or LEED, it's a living building.
Okay,
There's been discussions about that, I think more in the sustainability subcommittee, if that was something we'd wanna.
Go look at it.
So again, I think big picture, if we're going with living building challenge processes, passive house processes, that's one thing. If we want to go for some sort of certification, that's.
so
That's
it's
where
really
the
kind of what kind of
scientific
certification of passive house, if we're going that way? And then enrollment, the actual enrollment number, is
Correct.
that right?
That's
Yeah, we designed it for 700, you know,
And then
800, you know,
And then the
750.
budget sort of encompasses a lot of things, right? I mean, that's it.
A lot of these are gonna feed into the budget, so I think the January 31st, Andy, you kind of tied that into the educational programming meetings and the first pass of those and understanding where we might be.
So if you were to make, on those 5 things, if you were to make some sort of, I'm going to what we use this for. If you were to tell us, looking at this information, this is what I need, what would they be for those 5 things?
What would we, so on those 5 things,
Are
let
there
me start
6
from
things?
the bottom up is the budget, you know, are we locked in at 80, are we locked in at 80 to 100, is 100 negotiable? Is there, you know, options that we would wanna consider, even if they pushed our budget over $100 million? Those are the type of things that we need to think about. So for example, I'll try and give you an example of something that I think that you might wanna consider that even if it pushed you over $100 million. If you were doing something with sustainability that cost say $5 million, but we could show in 5 years, it's gonna save you $6 million, it might be something worth considering even though it's over your limit.
Right.
And I don't know if the committee and the town and the district have any appetite for that, or are we saying 100 million is the number?
The 100 is
Or
soft.
90 million is the number, or, you know, so those are the type of things that we need to know, because the design team needs to be able to come back to you and say, yes, you want a 3,000 seat auditorium, but you've told me I have an X limit. And all those things are balancing, so understanding where they're designing to, that's why we need to understand the budget. Same with the enrollment. If we're designing a building for 700 students versus 800 students, it's a lot different building. There's different number of classrooms, different size, everything. And maybe the 10,000 square foot gym doesn't change, whether it's 700 or 800, but everything else does. So that's another important one. So as the design team is meeting and getting that understanding with the programming, they still have to understand if they're going for 700 or 800 students.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit's the chicken and the egg, because until we've got the cost, we don't know quite what we're aiming for, and yet you need the information to know what the target is. So I'm looking forward to January. I think it starts to sort itself out a little bit, because we'll all be a lot more informed by the end of the month.
And I think the same thing with the Living Building Challenge. If we're going to direct the team that we have to get a Living Building Challenge certification, they just have to start putting that into the design. I think Matt was one that said, the sooner we start going down to net zero or a passive house, or the easier it is to maintain that. And I think that's what we're shooting for here. Again, are we going for certification? Are we going for, proper procedures? Are we going for options that are associated with that? Are we going to pick the ones that we think are best? Those are all the type of things that have to be discussed. Passive house, same thing. The town meeting, again, with the town meeting decision from the project perspective, is when is the deliverables? When do we need to have the drawing done? When do we need to have, can we take a little more time on feasibility? Or do we need to hold a hard date on the feasibility? That kind of thing. So it's giving the design team a clearer understanding, giving everybody, to your point, Laurie, it's kind of muddy right now. We're getting a lot of information together, and I think that information is going to start making this much clearer for everybody over the next 30 to 60 days.
A quick question on that one, Mike. The date there is January 1st. Does that mean over the next week we're trying to make a decision on when town meeting?
Is that just a typo, or is that a 30?
No, it's the end of the month, right? We had said another 30 days a minute
31st?
ago.
Okay, got it.
We're not, because that's not gonna happen.
Just take a point.
And I think this is a document, just so everybody knows, that we're going to be adding to and adjusting.
Yeah.
We never take anything off the list. If we've made a decision, we're just going to accept the risk, we've mitigated the risk or anything, it gets grayed out, it's always on the list. Eventually, when the list gets longer, to start, printing pages of closed items, we'll shorten it, but it'll always be there, recorded.
May I ask with regard to town meeting, what is the driver? Is the driver going to be the decision around having the vote coincide or not coincide with the presidential election? Or is it more driven by, hands down, we cannot have the town meeting in the summer? Because it would
Both.
help us, to know if it's front or back driven. Okay.
The summer's, I don't want to speak for everybody, I think the summer's an easier discussion, because I don't think it's a good idea.
And see,
I don't know how
is-
we haven't
if-
finished that
If
conversation.
we should make the assumption that we're not going to have a summer town meeting, then that is.
Helpful?
Well, I can say, looking at a calendar and that particular date that was proposed, and I know that everything's up for discussion right now, that is typically the week ahead of when school starts, that other opportunities in town are not open for, and I'm looking at Pat because she runs CCC, they are closed that week. That's like, for example, that's the week I went on vacation last year, because there's no summer camps, there's no, additional coverage, nothing is open because it's the week ahead of school starting. That would be a really tough week for me to try and tell my fellow friends and parents, like, don't plan, and people have already planned it, like maybe, I don't know, I don't
Well,
exactly.
just a clarification, you had said maybe August 26th, school is in session.
Yeah.
We're working on a calendar still.
It's not out
Yeah,
yet.
but
No,
it tends
we're-
to be more like the end of, 29.
Yeah, so Labor Day is until the 7th.
Yeah, it's a late start.
It's a late
For
Labor Day this
Day.
year.
Right,
So
we're
school
still
will
thinking
likely-
school starts prior to Labor Day.
Yes.
We don't know exactly when.
I'm still in
Gotcha.
committee with the
Gotcha. Okay.
teachers.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, so anyway, the point is that last week of August.
Yeah, it's great you bring that up, because from our perspective, a lot of our sports start up and things like that, so we might think everybody's back in town, but you're making a great point that For young
For
families,
young
that may not be
parents?
true at all.
No.
Yeah, that's like,
All right.
I don't know if
so
you wanna keep going on this,
So-
I think you wanted to do it in January, yeah.
We've got to move along. We understand what this document is,
Yep.
okay? This is the first time we've seen it, so we're kind of reacting, one, and how do we deal with it vis-a-vis you? It looks like my cut from this is there are several items on here that you would like additional information on before the end of January, okay? And we kind of understand what they are, okay? Just to leave it, on the cost issue, I leave it at 80 to 100 until I know otherwise in order to get the school that we want, okay? So we don't change those things lightly, okay? But with that understanding, we know we need to look at this. In order to do that, we have to have more information about what it means to make the decisions on the passive house. That's what we need to do.
can I make a point about that? There are 7 items on here related to sustainability out of 16. I don't see, and I don't know if there are in the works any meetings set up to start that discussion, but I don't think anyone's going to be comfortable making any of those decisions till we have energy models run and conversations around implications, whether it's cost, whether it's payback. So if those, and some of those are red, if those become, drivers in decision making, I guess I'm suggesting that conversation, those meetings need to start. They sometimes don't start this early in the process, like you haven't even done visioning yet. So I realize this may be out of line with what's normally done, but I think that process needs to get a jump start so that some of these decisions can either get taken off or decided on.
Yeah, I think we're going to revisit all of the dates in the last column to make sure that they're aligned with the meetings and the deliverables, to make sure that you have enough information in order to make those decisions.
I think the other thing you may end up doing is you may subdivide these. There may be a certain decision that has to be made sooner, but other decisions that can be pushed down the line, originally we had just passive house. But then when Andy and I were talking, we said, well, passive house principles and passive house certification should certainly be 2 different decision time, periods, things like that. So I think there's that ability.
So maybe said in another way, I think we need some help in talking about a process that allows us to make those decisions. Okay, you guys have done this before many, many times, okay? We got the people around the table here to participate in that discussion, and I think what we're talking about, what are the cost implications of various directions there? You gotta tell us how we're gonna interact with this schedule in terms of making those decisions. Okay, I'm not, tell me if I'm out of line. I don't, okay. Okay, thanks. The next item, I think, is where we are with the educational programming and upcoming meetings. Is that right?
And I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on this. The agendas were already circulated at the last SBC meeting. You have them on the screen. One of the biggest thing from the agenda is that these dates have been firmed up. We have our first educational visioning, it says number 2 because we had a leadership meeting. January 9th is confirmed. The programming interviews number 1 is confirmed for January 14th. Programming interviews number 2 is January 17th. We've eliminated the need for the 3rd meeting through very thoughtful and thorough scheduling. And then there will be educational visioning on January 23rd, sorry. So those have been provided in more detail also at the back of your handout. It talks about what is happening at each of those. We've identified who is going to be at all of them, and so we'll just be reporting back on what those developments are. Most importantly, I think for this committee is to briefly discuss the 2 community meetings. One is, the first one is planned for January 14th is what we're proposing, and that would be a listening session. So it would not be much presentation at all, other than a kickoff to say we're open to hearing from you.
think it's the 9th.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one document says the 9th and the agenda says the 14th.
Yeah.
So on the very last page, so it's the
Double check that.
14th?
I have the, yeah, sorry, no, I see it, yes. I have the 14th as our evening
Okay.
community one.
Okay, so this last page should say January 14th at 7 PM?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Which is good, because that'll give us more time to get word out after the break.
And January 9th on that page is, What
So
time?
it's the very last page of your handout has
Yeah,
January
right.
9th at the top, that should be struck out for 14.
Yeah.
And then this second one is the interactive community visioning on February 27th, and that's after all of the educational programming meetings have taken place. A lot more information will have been collected on sustainability, site, concepts, everything, so that'll be very important.
Where are they gonna be?
The community forums we're planning at the middle school. We haven't picked a building yet, Mr. Cameron. So probably Sanborn, the auditorium. Maybe Heather and Pat, we can work on the communication plan for getting the word out about those.
So both of them would be at the Sanborn Auditorium.
Yeah, I think so.
The only thing,
Assuming it's available.
for the second one, a lot of times if they're interactive, we might need an open floor space
Okay,
with round tables or something like that
okay. So we'll talk with you on
on the side.
maybe the cafeteria or something.
One thing I would like to clarify is, I'd like to set the dates for this meeting for the next 3 months at least, okay? And I don't know whether, well, why don't we set those dates, and then you can, this meeting is always available for something you might need from review from this committee, okay? So it might also help with the other processes. So, Mike, we generally have talked about one meeting a month. Is that do you think that continues to be reasonable on that?
I think that's reasonable, you know, I think if there's something to meet on, we should meet on it, you know, if there's multiple things that we need to do more, we can, but I think at this point, unless you think differently, we're doing all the programming and everything like that, it's really coming back and kind of giving an update.
Based on the subcommittee structure and the working groups and everything, I think this meeting falls on the third Thursday of the month.
The third Thursday of the next 3 months, which are, does somebody have those dates, just so we're
It'll
clear?
be the 16th of January. So the 20th of February, I think is that school vacation week?
Yes.
So, do we wanna do it the week after that
I
then?
would say the week before, like, because there's another two Thursdays in between, just
So 02, the 13th?
Yeah.
And then the 19th of March?
19th of March, okay. Everybody got those? Those are the next 3 meetings of this, and, you know, again, schedule what you need from this group with those meetings in mind, okay? Because those are the times we get together, and we also, obviously there's some significant decision-making here. When you need a meeting of the executive committee, you schedule it, okay, and we'll make it happen. Or, you know, we have obviously the sustainability committee to do that work, and the finance committee also. Okay, so work goes into the schedule that's necessary to get us to the resolution and the issues that we need to make, okay. Any other questions about schedule?
I have one.
Yeah,
It's for Kristen. Are there existing conditions surveys happening now, just space? Okay, just ahead of the programming interviews, the 2 days of, only because knowing what I know about meeting with users, they're gonna know what they know, which is the space that they have, so it's important to relate typically, okay, you're in a whatever size classroom, the new classrooms are typically this size, so that'll all be done ahead of the programming days.
We
Okay.
already did a walkthrough with Keith and Phil and Matt on, a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact, of
Okay.
the Sanborn. So it might be adding the other middle school just to also see how your sixth grade looks.
We're also doing geotech and stuff.
Yeah, as far as technical existing conditions, we did go get the release for the survey and geotech, so we're ramping up for those.
So we'll have to wait till the snow is gone.
Well,
I have a surveyor literally waiting to survey a project right now. He's like, the snow keeps messing him up.
Other questions about schedule or, so, okay, thank you. Were there any significant correspondence we've gotten?
I think we had one follow-up from community youth basketball about gym space and size.
Right.
And also one from the League of
League
Women
thanking us for-
Voters who asked about the February 7th meeting, I believe.
Yep.
Is that a Friday? I know it's on my
It's the
calendar.
first Friday, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yes, so I think they requested that someone be available from our committee to speak about sustainability.
That's
So-
what, so I've actually.
Have you had further correspondence? Because that's how I read
No,
the.
we had, so that's a date that I sent to you guys, weeks ago, as we were also
Right.
planning for the coffee that happened last week.
Yep.
So I think.
But we also got correspondence about it.
Okay,
Thanking
Yeah.
Tim for
What-
coming to that most
What they
recent.
wanted was a representative to talk about sustainability on an educational program, which we have covered pretty
Yeah.
well,
Yeah,
and a finance person. I will not be able to go to
Right,
that meeting.
yes, and-
Okay.
I'll be there, but I don't know,
I'll be
that was
there.
one I said I could go to, but
Right.
I'm not sure I fit the technical bill of any of those.
So-
I can speak globally
Okay, so
to
we'll think
all of
about
it,
the
but,
technical bill.
We'll think about the finance one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that
so,
was covered.
just so
Okay.
everyone is
You-
aware.
You can work with Matt on,
Definitely.
all right, that's correspondence. Public comment, any public comment? Right? Yes,
Diana Lee, 72-minute drive, on behalf of Mothers Out Front. I want to thank you for all your work. I want to have 3 quick comments. One, actually about the schedule, the September 18th town meeting. It is Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, so I was just wondering.
Oh, yeah, we wouldn't do that.
Understand the, and
Thank
also
you.
separation of state and church, but still, if we could do it maybe even on the 17th, just
Yeah, we wouldn't-
you guys
we
keep in
wouldn't do-
mind. And because it kind of could alienate the Jewish population here. As far as the auditorium, the big town, accommodate the town meeting, it sounds great, but who knows, in a few years, maybe everybody might be in a town meeting over on their computers at home. I mean, regretfully, so I don't know if we wanna accommodate this big town meeting that could be regretfully obsolete in, how many years. And as far as the sustainability, which I actually came to hear about, I think it'd be great if we could put some kind of certification goal, because then it will keep us on track of making sustainable, either net zero or passive house or whatever the committee decides. But I think it'd be nice to get, actual certification goal, just like how you buy organic food, and if it's organic, there is one cost, if it's not organic, but organic principle, it's a different perception, and people know what they're really getting. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? Or comments? Okay, new business, was there any other new business before the committee?
I have a question.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about in the communications committee, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I was thinking about it this morning. We had said that when we meet with people, we would be bringing those comments to this committee. And I think we need to think about how we want to do that.
For example, the meeting we just had with the League of Women Voters, how do we, yeah.
Good point.
So I've generated notes from that meeting. Does this become something that we circulate, or is it something that we spend 5 minutes kind of debriefing on whenever there's been a meeting?
Well, in some ways, it seems like it's a form of correspondence, that maybe if we have a meeting, when we do the correspondence section, that someone could just summarize, give a little something on what happened at the meeting, and then if people have questions, I think that would probably be a good way to do it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Extremely important
Yeah.
that we hear,
Yes.
Right.
that we hear verbally
Yeah.
what your sense is of what people were saying.
Yep.
Because I heard stuff from people about the League of Women Voters, and I said, well, I don't know, because I have no information. So it's very, very important for us to kind of get clued in as we move along.
So do you want a 2-minute synopsis under correspondence today?
Sure. If you're ready to do it.
I don't have it in front of me, but I can say that I walked away from that, and Tim and Heather and Laura, you can I walk away from that, there's a lot of support for the project from an educational point of view and a need for the middle school. I thought that the group was very supportive and asked really good questions about the educational vision. There were a lot of questions or a lot of comments regarding being able to demonstrate the downstream impact of sustainability against the cost of implementing sustainability goals, which is what you said, but there was certainly a number of comments about that. There were a lot of interest in us being able to explain the difference between the traditional model of the middle school and the 21st century model. And people really hungry for what does that look like in actual practice. And I was happy to hear people asking those questions. Other community uses of the building included leveraging the location of the rail trail, considering opportunities for town-school collaborations, and wanting us to sort of think beyond this is just for the middle school, but or just for the town meeting, but what are the other ways that the building could be used, maybe lifelong learning. People are always looking for places to have small group meetings. They wanted us to be sure that we considered lessons learned from the high school project. People referenced the roadshow that Heather just referenced, all the hard work that went into getting around town and explaining things to people last year. Interesting questions about educational vision around achieving the balance between accountability and social emotional learning, which is something we're all interested in. And then there was a comment I didn't understand, but I wrote it down, using the middle school to store energy. That's something that Matt could,
Being net positive. Is that what they're talking about?
Maybe battery storage.
Yeah. And for us to give examples of schools we've visited that best exemplified innovations in learning. So if we could get, maybe a list of the ones that we felt the best about if people wanted to go visit them or wanted to go look at their websites or see what. Anything else that?
Yeah, I think you captured it.
Very helpful.
Pat, to that
Very
point,
helpful, yeah.
some of us have collected photos from some of our visits. And I think when we talk about 21st century learning, we are talking about environments that look dramatically different than what some people envision from their own history in schools. So we might, through your committee chairs or some other way, collect those so that we might use a few of them on whatever road show gets wrapped into our efforts.
Can I just make a quick comment on echoing the desire for understanding how education's different? I had an interaction with a couple in town at a holiday party that they asked what I did for a living. I said what I do for a living, and they started asking questions about our schools. And they were surprised that they were, in fact, like Alcott. I said, well, my daughter goes to Alcott. It's serving its purpose. It's great for a 15-year-old school. And they were like, 15 years? And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's close to 15 years old. And they did the math when their daughter went there. They were like, oh my God, you're right. Like people they still feel like some of the schools in town that are now on the older side are new. Then they started asking about how education's changing. And this is like casual conversation. There was a Patriots game on and my kids were like being kids. And, so in between all of this, I just was sharing with them what I know and what I'm seeing. And at the end of it, when they were leaving, they went out of their way to thank me for sharing my thoughts on how education is different nowadays and how that impacts the architecture. Because I was saying, well, teachers don't stand up and lecture anymore like they did, like they did 50 years ago. Like now they're facilitating. And they said, well, how does that change the space? I said, well, here's how. And, the room has to be flexible, multiple teaching walls. Like I went into this whole, this is what I do for a living. So I was happy to have a conversation with them. And I think some of that information and explaining to people that went to school a long time ago, whose children are now adults and went to school a long time ago, it's important for them to understand why this is different. So any opportunity, I wasn't expecting to have that conversation that Sunday afternoon, but I did.
At the forum, we talked about the possibility of having sort of a case study of a project-based learning
Yeah, I think it would be
experience,
helpful, 'cause
Yeah,
I'm-
so people can hear about
I think
it.
people want to understand, but I think they don't, have the resources to explain it. So anyway, it was an interesting afternoon, and I thought, I was glad to have opened their eyes to
Yeah.
some of what's happening unintentionally.
I think
So-
that was good that you brought that up, and
Yes.
that we
Yeah.
talked,
Yeah.
I think this is a
It's
good way
real,
to do
yeah.
it, to
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think
summarize what
frequent
happens here.
correspondence, and
and-
let's
Yeah.
stay on track with that.
Okay, any other new business? Do we talk about that? Okay, one thing, before we leave, this is the last meeting before Christmas, and I've been thinking about how much we've accomplished and what, in some respects, what we have to do over the next year, which is enormous, and sort of the appreciation of all of the work that people have put in. So Lori and Don and I, there's behind us is a little token of appreciation for everybody with a note to each of you, okay? And that includes Mike Thomas, okay, who's helping us out with the forum, and Aaron, there's one for Aaron too, who helps us out with everything, okay? And there's a few for both of you guys, okay, for your things. So it's little. I'd emphasize there's no expenditure of funds. From okay, but it's just something to say. First off, happy holidays. Enjoy the holiday season, but also thank you, everyone here, for the great amount of work that you do as volunteers or beyond the pale, and some of our partners as we go into the new year. So, with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And thank you too.
Thank you so much.
Yes.